we had ourselves presented the views and concerns of the victims way back in February on the matter. And a majority of victims favored the Hague, while a smaller number favored Arusha, and only 2%, if I recall, was favoring Kenya. Personally, I did try to make out a strong case for Arusha. Despite the majority of the victims having suggested the Hague. And the reason that I did that was that it is important that there is some ownership of the process. And that ownership of the process, in my view, does trickle down to more effective representation of the victims. And the other reason why I found that it was appropriate for me to make out a case for Arusha at the time was that a good number of the victims who had talked about the Hague as being the venue for the trial did not have reasons that could be, strictly speaking, be categorized as legitimate legal reasons. And just by way of example, a good number of them were saying that we would want the process to be at the Hague because we would want the accused persons to feel how we felt, which, as you know, is not by itself a legitimate reason to have the process there. I think there is need to build our own regional institutions and to also have more visibility for international criminal justice, and that would be served by having a venue that is closer home. Again, fundamentally, the principle is that crimes should be tried as closely as possible to where they took place. Because that does have a sense in which it reduces the expenses of the entire justice system. And that means that it would reduce expenses for the witnesses, for the victims who need to travel to the court and see how everything is going on. There will be more participation. And it also does assist, as a matter of fact, also in reduced expenses for the defense itself, which is a justice issue. I may be here representing victims, but it is important to note that the justice system is not supposed to be a system that is unjust to any of the parties in the proceedings.
And how many victims are you representing now? How many are they?
We do have about, in total, 700 victims. We are still working on the last group of them. We have 290 or so who have already been confirmed to participate in the process, but then the others have their status pending, but basically, from the information we have, they are within the scope. So we would say about 700.
Okay, and these are the ones who are supposed to travel to The Hague?
Not quite. As a matter of fact, the ones that would travel to The Hague would be a very, very small number. That would be the ones who may be identified or who will be identified as having cases of very of harm that that they would be able to project before the court and give the court a much better insight as to the violence. So those would just be a very, very small sample of the 700. And but then, of course, the closer the venue, the easier it is for the victims to participate. And I'm talking now about participation not in the sense of having their views and concerns taken, but participation in terms of attendance at the sessions of the hearings.
And victims raised some concerns. I don't know whether it's victims or witnesses, but there are concerns of security, like the prosecution has been alleging. Is that one of the reasons why most of them probably prefer going to the Hague and not Arusha, Kenya?
Yes, of course, security it remains a major concern, but then there have been allegations by the prosecution that witnesses have been intimidated, that witnesses have been otherwise interfered with. Those allegations have been refuted by the defense, and so far as I know, there isn't yet a determination on the matter. But then, obviously, whether or not there is a finding eventually that is made of interference, or that there has been no interference, it is a serious concern that must be borne in mind at all times. And it should really, whichever way, it should inform the choice of venue.
I don't know if this can be disclosed, but are victims in Kenya or are victims at the Hague because, I mean, they have to travel, which means they're here in Kenya? Or?
The victims, I have no problem with disclosing the fact that the bulk of the victims are in Kenya. I think it's really common knowledge that we have victims who are still living within the same locations that they were living before. There are other victims who are in IDP camps. There are others who have relocated to live with relatives and so on, and others who have been who may just have resettled elsewhere. So the bulk of them are really within the country. And that is the reason why the work of my work as the common legal representative for victims in Kenya 1 basically is work that is based here.
And one more thing, sorry, I know time is not on our side, you have to leave. It's already 2?
Yeah, I can answer.
Okay, yeah. The other one I wanted to ask, what kind of concerns do victims have? I mean, how are they, do they want compensation? What kind of concerns do they have? And what's their hope about the trials? Will they finish fast, or what do they want?
It's varied. A lot, well, practically everybody wants a fairly speedy process. As you know, the violence took place at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. It's well over 5 years now. They would therefore want to see a fast process. But above that, there are those who just want to see that the process goes to its logical conclusion, and who may not even be so particularly concerned about having to gain something out of it personally, but just the fact that there is a justice process that is seen to take place, and one that is credible, one that is fair. There are others, of course, and they would be entitled in the case of a conviction to reparations. And I think that is also a fairly important concern, given that there are those who lost their loved ones, there are others who are seriously injured, there are yet others who are displaced from their habitual residences. So it's really a mixed grill of concerns. But I think what is important is to have a credible and expeditious process that also is meaningful to them.